Hello beer tubers and welcome to yet another Versus Beers in which we're battling two Swedish barley wines. It's been a while since we did a Versus Beers, but I thought it'd be fitting to battle two non-barrel aged Swedish barley wines, but then I started pouring these, it's like, okay, they're going to be massively different. So, we'll see. But this is some beers that I got from Johan in Sweden. Johan has sent so much Swedish beers, but right now, Danish beer bloggers are doing their hashtag BarleyWember thing, and I've been chiming in last year, and I've been chiming in this year as well, and I thought it'd be appropriate with a versus beers on these beers that Johan sent, because often with barley wines, and when I get them sent, they get to sit in the cellar for quite a while, just because it's beers I usually only drink this time of year, sometimes in the summer too, but it's not too often. But it's one of those styles that always is pushed on the back burner because they can handle age. But now is a good month to finally get around to cracking something. And these has been in the cellar. At least this one's, I think I got this one last year, and this one's been quite a while. And I'm actually not entirely sure if I got this. Maybe I got this from Jenny, actually. I'm not entirely sure because it's quite a long time and this one has been in the cellar. But we're battling Fjäderholmarnas Bryggeri's Heavy Fuel barley wine up against Mariatorgets Mikrobryggeri barley wine 13.5%. So, very simple name on this one. And, both are breweries I've never really tried any beer from, as far as I know. Fjäderholmarnas are in Stockholm, and I don't know Mariatorgets if there is an address on here. There isn't. It just says a website to check out. But these are some hefty beers. This is 13%, this is 13.5. I thought, both are Swedish. Maybe it'll be worth, it would be fun to pitch them up against each other. But this looks like a stout in the glass. And the reason for that is because Mariatorgets barley wine is boiled for 30 hours, which is craziness. That's pretty much what they do at Wiltworks with Medianoche and their stout. They boil it for 36 hours because it's meant for barrels. This is not barrel aged, however. Both of these are non-barrel aged beers, but this one, it's probably been aged. Both of them has been aged. This one, I don't know what vintage it is. It's the 13% one. I think they had a vintage guide actually on Untapped, but this was at least brewed in 2008 just before Christmas, and then it's been aged in tanks until they release it. And the one weird thing with this one, Heavy Fuel here, is that for fun in this one they also chucked in cornflakes and frosted flakes in the mash. So yeah, why not? It's just starch. It's gonna help make the beer a bit more beefy, I guess. But they say that this can also be aged for many years, just like fine red wine. But I'm thinking we should start with this just by looking on the color on that. So let's start out with Heavy Fuel. Again, this looks more what I'd expect from a barley wine. It is a nice kind of very clear copper, rust orange kind of color. Not a lot of head. The head actually reminds me of getting beer on cask. It looks like this is gonna have next to no CO2, or at least just very, very fine levels of CO2. Whereas, this looks like an imperial stout, really. But let's start off with this one and check out the aroma. Very classic barley wine. Smells nice. Chestnutty kind of character to it. Hugely nutty, hugely caramelly, and then again, it's starting to show a little bit of age. Like there is some port kind of sherry vibes, but in this style, it really suits it because it's this malt heavy, dark fruity, malty rich beer where flavors like that just works. You don't want that flavor with really bright hoppy beer, but for some reason with hops, oxidization is just it's a killer. For some reason it works really fast and kills off flavor. Chemically, I don't know why, but in that beer, you don't want these flavors, but in this, it suits it. I didn't expect to be smelling cornflakes or frosted flakes. You just smell rich cereal grain, toffee, almost a hint of butterscotch. There's also a hint of esters, a hint of slight jammy fruitiness, but it's mostly really beefy malt characters, which is what I prefer in barley wines in the English style, and both of these are English styled. A bit of a honey malt thing. It smells really nice. Let's give it a taste. Cheers. Thanks a ton for the beers, Johan / Jenny. Cheers. Really, Really, really light carbonation. But it's there. And in a barley wine, a super light carbonation is much more forgivable than in other styles. But I do want a little bit. Like, I would like more than this. A lot of warmth going down. It's not like intense, crazy, boozy, but you definitely sense that it's a 13% beer. Huge caramel malt profile, really like fudgy caramel malt, but I'm getting huge vibes of sherry and Madeira wine because of oxidation, and also like maybe more Madeira because it's a bit more bright and uplifting, at least to like a Tawny port in my mind. It also depends on what grapes are in there, but it just reminds me a bit more of a Madeira than it does a port, and then definitely like really dry sherry or even like a dry vermouth or something like that in this one. Like, it has a lot of dryness, and which really balances out the sweetness. Even though it's actually quite a dry body wine. It's still very slick and oily, but it's really dry. And I think that's also leftover hop flavor. And I think, was it East Kent Goldings they used in this? Yeah. Huge amounts of East Kent Goldings. And leave it to age. It almost reminds me of like a supercharged Golden Pride or something like that. But I think, it's also because it's like, this really tastes quintessentially classic and old school. This is much more like in tune of what I also think of when I think British Imperial or British barley wine or English barley wine than a lot of the American interpretations, which is just more, even crazier and beefier than this, even though it's also quite beefy. It's a nice barley wine, but I'm not just blown away by it. But it's a nice sipper. So let's move on to this one. I mean, that just looks nuts. Mariatorgets Mikrobryggeri barley wine, 13.5%. There was a little bit of info on this one online. And it says that it's a barley wine brewed with Maris Otter, Imperial malt, and medium crystal malt. And then it's Nottingham yeast, and then that it's boiled for 30 hours, which is just craziness. Nottingham is not my favorite yeast, but in a beer like this, it could probably work. So this one just looks crazy. I mean, I think there was a couple of people that told me this is the thickest beer they've ever had. And if you don't trade a lot and try to chase hype, even though most people probably don't do that, but big thick mouthfeel is like the big thing for like barley wine and stout, and I can totally see like this looks like it's crazy thick. You can also see it pouring out of the bottle. It makes sense when you boil it for 30 hours. There's going to be lots of more unfermentables, but it looks like a stout. I mean, what you maybe would call a black barley wine, but that's totally just because of crazy Maillard effect in the kettle. It's black, it's tan, the head. I mean, there's no light bleeding through that beer. I mean, I think on the top of the glass, you can see like just below the head, you can see it's the really, really dark color of like brown or red. But otherwise, if I got this blind, I might think it was an Imperial Stout, at least just by color. But let's check out the aroma on this one. Intensely more British. There's just so many esters compared to that, actually. Huge fruit esters. Fruit cake. Jammy fruit. That's actually not what I expected. It just looked much more like what I interpret from like what an American brewer would do. But that's all to do with the choice of yeast and temperatures. Yeah, huge like amounts of licorice to it as well to me, like licoricey umami vibes. There's just so much yeast. Like, that's crazy the amounts of yeast ester. This is probably fermented fairly warm, just to give that intense amount of like really stewed, jammy fruitiness. Man, there's so much. There's definitely also a twinge of booze in this one, and maybe a bit more than on the heavy fuel. Yeah, like, but it's not roasty per se, really. It's like just like really, really rich umami. It's just like smells like crazily concentrated caramelization, and it's kind of what you also get in something like Medianoche, really. But this just compared to Medianoche is like very clean in terms of yeast, whereas this is like a huge yeast profile. I just compared it. I know it's a stout, but it's just because it's boiled for a hella long too. But yeah, it's like a huge amount, like licoricey dark fruits, and like It's so deep and umami rich. It's like almost like hints of soy sauce and like to me that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then underneath there's like this. It's almost like I want to say burnt caramel, really like something like that. It's just like a really intense caramel that's so deep that it isn't something that you associate with caramel malts necessarily. Man, that's rich. But I'm amazed about the amount of dark fruit on this. That's crazy. I think like a lot of it's like when you look at what people talk about in beer nowadays, a lot of people seem afraid of dark fruit flavor. So I think this is something that would scare a lot of people. Like this seemed very English, maybe more so in terms of its harmony and everything, whereas this just screams like over the top English, just because there's so many esters. I think it's like a glass of melted Bassett wine gums almost. But yeah, let's give it a taste, guys. Cheers, and thanks again, Johan. Slash Jenny. She's thick. She's real thick. It is like drinking melted wine gums. Wow. It is so intensely estery. That is crazy. I don't think I've ever drunk an English barley wine with this intensity of yeast ester. Like this just massive jammy dark fruit character. Like fruitiness is what you get from esters and yeast, but with all the boiled, crazy boiledness or and caramel malts and whatnot in the beer here, and the fact that again it's been boiled for so long, like because it's such a darker profile and whatnot, the esters you get are much more into this kind of dark fruit thing because it plays around with the profile of the esters of the yeast plays around with the profile of whatever is in the beer. So like that's why you also like in New England IPAs when you use these English yeasts you get more of these fruity things and whatnot, like fruity tropical things. But this is just like so much jammy dark fruit, like it's crazy. Like it's like stewed, just a huge boatload of dried and stewed forest fruits and like fruit cake and like this has the whole plethora of crazy dark fruit esters. Like, it's so intense. I think some people, to some extent, would almost think Belgian, like because some Belgian yeast strains have like these crazy, sharp, candied kind of stewed fruit esters, and there's almost something like that in here. That is crazy, and it's so thick. It's so thick. Interestingly, even though it's so thick, it definitely has a higher carbonation than this. And the carbonation is very similar to something like hype stouts and whatnot. Like you're totally getting something like that. But I will say the esters are a bit too much. Like they are so intense, and I think it's a bit of a shame because there's definitely something of the base beer there, but they really shine so bright. Like there's so much of it. It overshadows a lot of other complexity, I think, which is a shame. And I think that's possibly just high fermentation temperature. That's often, part of it, or under pitching, or it could also be just because it's a huge, strong beer. The stronger beer, the stronger the esters. Like maybe this is not the best to use for this kind of beer. Like also in my experience, personally, I've not been a big fan of the flavor profile I get from Nottingham yeast. So that could be it. But like if you're afraid of dark fruit, you will not like this. There's also some, there's definitely also some port kind of vibes to this one as well, and like sherry vibes and that kind of stuff. And therefore, just a brief sec, I got like really huge caramelized candied red apple, just like briefly, like hugely. That could also be acetaldehyde, which is an appley flavor. The more I'm smelling, that's actually a good amount of like red apple flavor. And if it's, I'm not sure if it is, but if it's acetaldehyde, it's technically an off flavor, and it'll give you a crazy hangover because it's in huge amounts. It's it's not cancerogenic, no. Is it poisonous? I can't. It's slightly toxic at least. It's not something you're gonna like. If you have a really appley beer, you're not gonna die from drinking it. But in huge amounts, it's gonna, like in the beers that are really like Duvel, for example, it has loads of it, and it's like one of the study beers if you want to figure out the off flavor. And Like if you drink a lot of Duvel, you'll get a hangover. Also, because it's a strong beer, but you'll get a heavy hangover as well because of acetaldehyde. And I feel like that it might be that, but I think it also could be a weird fruit ester because fruit esters can just go like it could be all over the place. The more I'm drinking it though, the more I'm getting of like a really heavily caramelized malt flavor, but also like soy saucy and umami rich flavors. I totally think this could be a heavy hitter of a barley wine, but I still feel like it needs a little bit of work, just because I think the esters are a bit too much. Personally, I think they overshadow a bit too much. Like this screams like a beer made for barrels too. Like this is something that would be awesome to put in a barrel. But I don't know. Just maybe it's just me. You know, it's just like I think the yeast profile is a bit too intense. But if we jump back to this. That's so weird. Like, that seems so much like easygoing and like, just like it seems like almost drinking like a Fuller's Golden Pride next to this, just because this is so beefy. It's not barley wines that I'm really floored or blown away by. They are quite nice, but like this is like really one extreme, and this is a bit more balanced. But again, this one is lacking for me in terms of the CO2 really. I think this would be, and it also has a bit of like an acetone vibe, like sharp, like permanent marker. But like, the more I'm smelling it, the more I'm like just like off flavor, off flavor, off flavor. But acetone, you know, it might also just be like a bit of a boozy alcohol touch. But I'm actually leaning towards this just because this is so over the top, and I thought it'd be the other way around because this has been boiled for 30 hours. But that just shows like. Just extreme might always be the best choice, and it's also a lot about the composition of everything, all the different crazy aspects in a beer. And I'm sure they've also looked at it in this beer, but it's just like so crazy on esters. I don't think I've ever had a beer like if you ever want to try and see what English fruitcake esters or and dark fruit esters is about, drink this. Like it's supercharged, like crazy, and again almost a bit not much. But man, the mouthfeel is great on it. Man, the more I smell, like I'm almost getting like a perfumey red apple. Like I had these Kit Kat does like loads of weird Kit Kat variants in Japan, and there was like this Kit Kat with shiso apple. It's almost like this, like almost like fake apple flavor. So I'm actually gonna give it to Heavy Fuel. Like I didn't expect that, but this reminds me of drinking again, as I said, a supercharged Golden Pride, pretty much, just with a little less carbonation. Here you taste more of a classic. Just like fudgy caramel malt backbone, but where this is just like there's so much crazy fruitiness going on. Like it smells and tastes a bit like stressed out yeast profile, really. Like the yeast has been really stressed out. But what do I know? I'm just a beer geek online. But in terms of grades, again, I'm not totally floored, but this was a really fun battle. I think I really don't want to go more than like an 89, 88 on the Heavy Fuel, even though it's the one I like the most. But it's just compared to some of the really, really good party wines I've had, it's just like it's for some reason it's lacking a bit of the complexity. Maybe it's the CO2 is the big drawdown. Like if this had a bit more body, because it's also not as rich. But if this has a bit more body, and barrel aging, it could be really, really awesome. But so I think we'll say 89. And this, like, I'm sure there's a lot of people who's gonna love this and give this like probably 93s plus. But for me, like, it's just it's actually really unbalanced. That's pretty much because there's it seems like a good idea boiling for 30 hours, but like, and it can turn really out really nice as I said, but it's just like it is so crazy on esters. Like it's so dominating, and again, acid aldehydes is like it's just confusing my nose of it. It just smells like too much of crazy stewed fruits and whatnot. Maybe an 85. I gotta give big ups for that mouthfeel though, and I gotta give big ups for the richness of umami and whatnot there is there from the malt. But I just think the yeast is just a bit too crazy. It just tastes like the yeast is a bit too stressed out in this beer. So an 86, 87-ish, and an 89 for Heavy Fuel. They're nice barley wines, but I think, I've had better, but they are nice. And with work, they could be really fantastic beers. You can definitely taste that. So, this was fun. What a crazy battle. I didn't expect that there would be this huge, crazy difference in these beers. And this just shows, like, how big a role, like, managing fermentation plays in a beer with this one. Like, it's fucking crazy. The yeast has just gone nuts in this. Whereas this is much more well balanced. And, like, you can taste different aspects of the beer. Craziness. That was fun. Barley wine is life. Barley wine is awesome. This was fun to do. So if you guys, and hashtag Barley Wember, of course, too. But yeah, the winner is Fjäderholmarnas Bryggeri and Heavy Fuel. But if you guys had a chance to try either this one or Mariatorgets Barley Wine on 13.5%, let me know what you thought of them. Crazy beers. Fun to do some Swedish crazy barley wine. But we got more coming. We got some classic Nynäshamns barley wine too. We got their Brewed, but also to compare with a few variants I haven't tried, which is awesome that Johan also sent, and some other stuff. Johan actually sent a lot of barley wine, but this was another crazy long video, so we got to wrap it up now. So if you guys had either of these, let us know what you thought of them. As always, remember to comment, subscribe, check out the Facebook fan page and Twitter and Instagram. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Ring the bell for future notifications about videos, and I'm going to say cheers in my favorite, which was Heavy Fuel by surprise. I was thinking this is going to be crazy good because 30-hour boiling, but there you go. But yeah, cheers, and see you guys in another Versus Beers.